Welcome to Tetewathá, Partyline Talkshow on K1037. I'm your host, Arlene Gawanahawi Jacobs. Wanizarade MCK Ruaya Danadaktunne. Today is MCK Friday, and our special guest today is Grand Chief Joseph Tokwiro Norton. Hi, Joe. How are you?
Oh, not too bad.
Not too bad.
Getting along. Let's put it that way.
You're not feeling well, or you're just... It's Friday.
Yeah, well, there's some tiredness, fatigue right now.
I'm sure. I think this is one of the things we're going to start with, what's been going on the last 27 days, actually. The thing I wanted to find out about is that the CP was inspecting the tracks on Wednesday. How did this come about? Was it between council meeting with CP or CP meeting with the firekeepers, or how did that work?
It was a combination of several different parts of the community that finally agreed. I don't know all the details. I was involved maybe from sort of on the edges. Let the people from our office, people such as Frank McCumber, Cody Daibo, Winona, Olson Lahash, and to an extent Kasnawa's Kaidir. They were there constantly moving in amongst it. And then you had the 207 Longhouse, you had the Mohawk Trail Longhouse, then the firekeepers themselves, I guess, came to the point in time to basically say, we are in agreement, we're going to move. There was no real official press release or announcement until just, within the last, I would say, 24 to 48 hours to make people aware and to speak directly to CP to advise them, that they were going to be moving. They would allow them to come in and clear the snow, inspect the rails, because that's what they have to do. And once everything is considered safe, then they would start the trains rolling. I'm of the understanding it's probably tomorrow that something's going to be trains rolling, if not today. I stand to be corrected on that, and I don't want to start a panic with anybody or anything, but I don't have the inside information on that. But they will start to move, and the targeted date for commuter trains is for Monday. And in the meantime, as we all saw this morning on TV, anyway, that's the first time I saw it, was the actual moving of the fire. But all of that has been all in sort of coordinated. And
so it was all planned amongst all of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our representatives from the council, as well as all the other parties that I mentioned.
So I guess that's why there wasn't a press release, because it was all a coordinated effort.
A coordinated effort is what happened there.
Okay, good. So yesterday, the land protectors moved the fire from the CP right-of-way to a new location along Highway 132 that does not disrupt traffic. Many are very relieved about that. I think last week there was a lot of hesitation and worriedness about what was going to happen after the injunction it was never served, but of course we received the injunction. Yeah. You could always tell the nervousness of the people from the meetings. Very nervous and apprehensive and what's going to happen. And I think a lot of people worried about that. Personally, I wasn't worried because I knew if they came in, they would have resistance, let's put it that way. So I'm glad they decided not to come in. And our peacekeepers, too, have to have a special recognition. There was, the two longhouses, MCK, the firekeepers, but also the peacekeepers did their part.
I forgot to mention the peacekeepers.
I know, that's why I'm saying it. So I think, we have to give them a special shout out also. And I liked what you said in the press release yesterday. I'll read it. Despite certain politicians losing their composure and certain media commentators fanning the flames of hatred throughout this ordeal, the land protectors acted with peace, dignity, and respect. And I think that's a very good statement. I had to write it down and make sure I said it, because not everybody gets the press releases. I get it on my computer, so...
Well, we have to look at overall what has happened in this situation. There's some similarities to what happened in 1990.
Very much.
The community wasn't aware, nor were they supporting. You know, when the bridge and the highways were closed, and all of that to begin with. But once we began to talk amongst ourselves and everything, and the council threw their support behind the people at the barricades, then it began to grow, and you had the veterans in the community jumped in, took over the security, and really took charge. You know, community members took charge, and the emergency. Out of that grew the emergency preparedness. You know, to the extent where it is now, and it really proved that the community could do things together. Once we knew, you know, it was going to be the long haul, as what was said. So in this instance over here, there was kind of like people understood what to do right away. You know, and we weren't going to make any statements about, you know, we're against, you know, what they're doing there, but there was a lot of question as to who was responsible,
exactly,
who was the boss, so to speak, and fingers were pointed all over the place. But in the end, you know, as we began to understand and work together and talk, and that was the main thing, instead of making comments, you know, on Facebook and going before a camera, you know, and condemning. I said, no, we can't do that. We're not going to do that.
No.
They're our own people, you know, so we have to respect that. But we have to find out what's the intention, what's the plan. If in the future we're going to do something like this again, we should all be involved in one way or another.
Exactly.
You know, and be able to say, okay, we have a designated group of people who come together and say, you know, we would like to show support for something outside of Kahnawake, or for ourselves, for that matter, because there are things that are coming in the future that are very disturbing, that will make things a lot difficult if we can't settle them politically. Then there may be, you know, and I'm not promoting that type of action, but who knows, you know?
But it's a reality.
It's a reality. That's the kind of world we live in at this time. And I know that throughout the community, the elders, there was a lot of concern from people who were scared. They didn't want to see another 1990 again, you know. And I mean, you spoke about it, and others talked about it, you know, that there were people out there that were afraid. And you and I are elders now, so we can be afraid too.
No. Yes, I agree with you. We are the elders now.
Yeah.
It just seems so comical, which I can't believe it. But another statement you made, you said, even in 2020, it seems that it takes a crisis for governments to truly engage. Do you think things will change?
With I guess we can call it, with the demonstration of the power, you know, the old saying, power of the people. Well, this is what was demonstrated right across the country. The power of a certain sector of the population that said, you know, we're not going to stand for this. This is unacceptable. So we have to do something to show you our anger and our dissatisfaction, the way you're treating us. And part of this also was to thank the Wet'suwet'en people who supported us in 1990 also. They stood up for us then, so, you know, we should not hesitate. And it only takes a small group of people to show that support, and then it grows after that. And when I'm not talking just about Kahnawake, talking about right across the country. And the governments, big business, very influential people saw how taking this kind of action can really tie up this country. It may be once in a lifetime that something like this will happen, but certainly it sends a strong message, you know. In other words, don't mess with us, you know. Sit down with us, talk to us, be fair about the things that need to happen, you know.
Yeah, I think they've gotten away with it for so long that they just think they can just come in and overrun, and it's on native land. It's okay.
it's common
okay.
practice to them. You know,
it is common practice. I hope the Wet'suwet'en people are going to come to a resolve of their issues.
It's going to be.
How is it looking? We haven't heard anything about the special agreement that they made.
We're getting updates periodically. It's going to be difficult because, I mean, in order for to reach an agreement, there's almost like a part of the situation is the pipeline is beyond sort of like return. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That's where it seems it is at this point in time. And part of the reaction of our people is to say, okay, we're going to free up the rails, but we're going to continue to protest. We're just going to move a couple of 100 yards, north of where we are, and we're going to set up shop there and on the green spaces, as it's called, and continue to show people that we are in support. And you know what really has become obvious is that it's not only indigenous people, it's non-native people too.
That's right.
Colleges, universities, high schools, the young people who have taken up the argument about the future, their future.
The environment.
Yeah, the environment. It's not only ours, it's theirs too.
Of course.
And the government has to listen to that. So it's not just us that's been saying, you got to stop this. It's their own people, their own voters that are turning around, business people, what have you. They felt the pinch, if you will, of not being able to get product. And a lot of them were very angry over that, having to lay off people and that sort of thing. But now they got to turn to government and they have to put the pressure on them, not to try to use force, but try to use reason. Mm-hmm. And to use reason to be able to settle issues such as this so that goods can move, things can happen in the country because it's to everybody's benefit. And if it's been very clear, it's been pointed out that 23 years ago, this declaration now, part of the agreement to recognize the Wet'suwet'en indigenous leadership, the traditional leaders. 23 years ago, there was a court decision, excuse me, called Dalgamuk. Mm-hmm. And in that decision, it was recognized way back then. And Canada did nothing to help promote that because it's something that's important to everybody. It's not just the Dalgamuk, it's here. Mm-hmm. Our people, the traditional people, the traditional land, because it's not just this small acreage we have. It's not just the scenery of Sault Ste. Louis. It's beyond that, all the way down to Quebec City, all the way up to what remains of Akwesasne because of the recent settlement.
Oh, well, we're going to talk about that later on.
So it's much broader than that, and going all the way to the American border. It gives us an opportunity, to really start talking to Canada about that and say, wait a minute here. You're not going to limit us in what we feel is our traditional homeland. Mm-hmm. Because up in Wet'suwet'en territory, it's 22,000 hectares or kilometers of land, which is huge. There's all kind of non-native people living in there too, but they're living on their territory. So, and it's the same situation here,
It's throughout all this time, the two longhouses, MCK, and the community have worked together to come to a peaceful resolve. And I think, we should all be thankful.
Not only thankful, but let's take what's happened in this short 3-week period and let's extend it. Let's let it become a permanent thing now.
Yeah.
It should be like that all the time. And we've been talking about that for years and years and years,
Yes.
Decades we've been talking. We've been saying we should be doing this. Well, we've accomplished it. We've accomplished it in such a huge way, and it demonstrates not only internally but externally what kind of authority we have, what kind of power we have. We just have to be careful how we use that power, We have the power to make peace. We have the power to make war, as our ancestors always said,
But I don't know why the outside politicians have downplayed it and downplayed us. Like, oh, well, it's only another barricade. Yeah, well, it lasted 27 days, so it hurt you, you know?
They're afraid of us, that's why.
Well, I hope they learned a lesson, and you know, they're going to change their way, the way they deal with Indigenous people and First Nations in general.
Well, that's going to happen. I'm seeing the results of that already. I've been, you know, throughout all this time, I've been talking to federal ministers, like the Minister of Justice, what's his name? Everybody knows Mark Miller and things like that, and they know and they understand. They realize the changes have to come. It can't continue the way it is. Prime Minister, you know, he's been demonized, you know, by by his own people, as well as, you know, the our side. But he's made these declarations. Now he's got to live up to it.
That's right.
It's out there now. What are you going to do? Pull it back and say, you know, like the reconciliation, United Nations Declaration on Indigenous Populations, and so many other things that he's done. You know, he's talked about the relationship between Canada, Indigenous people. His number one priority. Most important. All right. Well, look what happened here, you know.
I know. Okay, Joe, with that, we'll take a break, okay? And we're back. Today is MCK Friday, and my special guest today is Grand Chief Joseph Tokwiro Norton. And we're talking about some incidents that went on in our community that affected the outside community, but has changed. So, Joe, would you like to continue on that?
Yeah, there's certain things that I'd like to, you know, the premier of the province of British Columbia was honored in last year at the Assembly of First Nations, the annual Christmas gathering.
Is that Horgan?
Horgan,
yeah. Okay.
He was honored. They blanketed him, as they call it, you know. He was on stage, and there was all this rigmarole about such a great man, because he led the way in his government to support United Nations declarations on UNDRIP. They made it the law in British Columbia, you know. So a little over a month later, suddenly he's got his troops attacking, you know. Is that part of UNDRIP? So I've said to people, and I've said it to the national chief, I said, that's a sacred ceremony that you performed, putting a blanket on him. You should go and strip that blanket from him.
Yes.
You know, because it's a complete...
it's a joke.
Yeah.
I mean, it had meaning for the First Nation people, but it had no meaning to him. Yeah. It's just a blanket.
You know, and he's there, and he's soaking up all the glory. You know, I sat there, and everybody was cheering, standing up. I didn't. I just sat there, and I was listening and looking at him, you know, and wondering, you know, what kind of person is this?
What was this, at the Special Assembly, or?
Yeah, in December.
Okay.
Last December.
Yeah. Wow.
Now, you know, here we are at the not over here, maybe the tail end of this situation, but over there, there's in Wet'suwet'en territory, they're still trying to figure out, you know, how to disengage from this this situation. What I had also attempted to do was to, and we did this talking with, you know, our chief peacekeeper, Dwayne Zachary, to say that we can send peacekeepers from Kahnawake, maybe 4 of them, to be part of assisting to patrol in that area, to ease the pressure off the people there, and what have you, because they were not happy with the RCMP. The very ones that were supposed to provide peace and security to the region were the ones who were actually intimidating, bullying, and going after the people there, and they were part of dismantling of the blockades, you know, arresting people at gunpoint and all that stuff. So I had floated that idea out there. I talked to the Minister of Justice. I talked to Mark Miller about that, and they both thought it was a good idea, you know. He says, yes, it's something we could think about. But then the Minister of Public Security, I think his name is Bill Blair, he gets up and he says, oh, no, the RCMP can do a fine job, you know. Yeah, that's why you have all this trouble. They did such a terrible and horrible job and showed their racism in attacking people, brutally. Now you're going to turn around and say, no, they can do the job. Well, it's not something that sat very well with me, but we're going to revisit that issue in the future, and just raise the idea, the thinking about the colonialistic thinking that goes into those kinds of statements, because Dwayne had gone even further than that in saying that he is the, he's the president of the First Nations police chiefs across the country. And he went further and he said, what I can do is I can get 2 or 3 police officers from right across the country to come, I mean, not forever, but for a short time period. Until things calm down and until perhaps in that region they get their own indigenous police force to replace the RCMP. And he was ready to do that. And I said, good. I said, so that was the idea we had, but it was pushed aside, So you still have RCMP in the area, buzzing around, but they're also what they call the sort of like forest rangers or something like that. They're brought in, but they're white people, their thinking is no different than RCMP. It's just that they don't carry weapons. There's a difference between that, but it's still a situation that needs to be calmed down,
I think what some people don't understand is our peacekeepers got RCMP training.
Oh yeah.
So that's who trained them.
They're equivalent.
Yeah, they
or even
are.
better in terms of.
They are, because they can work anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not only Quebec. So I thought that was, I didn't know that until my grandson went through it.
Yeah.
So that's how I know. It's so interesting that people are so surprised when we do something. When something is done, we stand up for our rights and we stand up for what we believe in. And people are, oh my God, what are they doing this for? And how come they're doing that? Well, look around, people. You have to look around at what they've done to us.
Yep.
And it's not like we're so poor. It's just that now we're together. And that's going to make a difference, is that unity.
That's what I really, out of all of this, one of the most important things is that people came together. And we shouldn't allow that to, we go back to our corners after that, and then we just...
I hope not. No. I hope not.
I'm going to do whatever I can to keep this, together,
Because I think people saw that it can happen. We've been waiting, and it's always something that comes up, and it doesn't happen again. So I hope the momentum holds. Anyway.
Well, early on, when the situation started, 3 weeks ago, or like you said, 27 days.
27 days.
Early on, during that short time period right at the beginning, was so important because there was different things that were being said and fingers pointed, on Facebook, like people were going crazy on there, and we had discussions in the beginning amongst the 2 longhouses, Mohawk Trail, 207, and the council. And later on, the representation from the firekeepers to say we got to have a united voice here. If I go on, because I did a lot of media coverage, I talked to Kenneth, and Kenneth represents the 207 as the secretary, and him and Joe Dium do a lot of their speaking. So there has to be coordination in what we're saying. We got to be saying the same thing.
You have to be on the same page.
Yeah, same page as everybody likes to say. And the people at the fire also, in terms of, we didn't want to say anything to, that might disrupt what they were attempting to do. So we were very careful about that. So there was no attacking of anybody or anything, to cause disruptions between the parties. And we met at the council called for 2 meetings at the Knights of Columbus. The 207 called for, I think, 2 meetings.
2 meetings, I think, yeah.
And then one was held at the Mohawk Trail, but they have a small
it's
building.
it's small, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we'll have to help them expand it.
Oh, I think so. That would be good. So is there anything else you have to say on this issue?
No, I think that's about it. We've covered it to death, if you will. So I guess the stories will come out gradually over the course of time about how, why, where, and various things that happened throughout the course of 27 days.
Well, I'm glad it's moved to a better place, I could say. So with that, I'll say, to the people on the outside, Yawa. I'd like to talk about the Dundee claim from Akwesasne. How do you, I can't say do you agree with it, or, because I don't know enough about it to agree or disagree, but the federal cabinet approved $240 million in compensation to settle the land claim. The territory known as Dundee. So in 1981, the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake filed a claim asking for the land to be returned, asserting that an alleged surrender of the land in 1888 was invalid. But now that they've accepted the agreement, they're going to say that it was valid. They have to write that in the agreement. So, I don't know how to take that. I mean, I'm not from Akwesasne, but I don't know. Do you have any comments?
Yeah. Not being an expert, and then incidentally, you say Kahnawake.
Oh, I said Kahnawake.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Akwesasne. Thank you for that.
I'm not an expert on the details of the settlement, but we did have several meetings when I got reelected again in 2015. It was one of the first things we talked about. We went to visit Akwesasne and met with the chief, Abraham Benedict, and his people, and they had a top-notch team of people. They're very good. And there was comments on our part that, maybe we should be looking at combining our efforts between Kahnawake and Akwesasne, because that Dundee claim, it almost goes up to Valleyfield.
It does.
It's very, very close.
Yeah.
It's just a kilometer away from Valleyfield, or maybe even closer than that, and then it goes south. It's sort of like on an angle like this, and I started thinking about that, and we talked with the council here in Kahnawake and said, we're in the process, and we have been in the process for a long time, trying to reacquire or trying to get our rights and title back on the scenery. On the scenery lands, and but from a traditional
Standpoint.
Traditional standpoint, our land goes all the way to Quebec City, through the Richelieu Valley, all the way up to the American border. And in approaching Akwesasne, we said, why don't we approach it together at that level, that, when you go to the border, when you cross over at where the land claim is, what's the name of the border there?
I always call it Dundee.
Yeah, well, Dundee. From there, and you go directly south after that, all the way down to here, all south, right to the border, is part of our territory, and even into the U.S. too, even into New York State. So we're, after this settlement, and what they call Zigaristizere, which means the border, it's. And we had sent letters to Akwesasne to asking them, to rethink that situation. We had sent letters to Minister Bennett, advising her that we were not in support of that particular situation. And I'm being very careful about, because I don't want to churn up some bad feelings regarding this, but it doesn't really help us the way that settlement took place. It doesn't.
No.
In the conditions, if ever we get to that point here, they're probably going to the government will want to do the same thing too. And yet our eyes are not only on the scenery, it's beyond that, because we've been talking about that. And as a matter of fact, during the 3 weeks, the last 27 days, there was a protest in St. Lambert. Mm-hmm. You remember they went on the tracks?
Yes.
Legault made a statement that it's okay, it's not on Mohawk territory.
That's right. Yeah.
We sent out a notification. We said it is on Mohawk territory. It is our territory, but that's there's not much we can do to control that situation. But we got to keep making those assertions over and over again. So with the Akwesasne situation, if we could have combined our efforts to work together, I know that they had filed in 1981, but we have been we've been fighting this for 400 years now. Mm-hmm. And there's been
it's way overdue.
Yeah, we haven't filed we filed a grievance. That's the only thing we've done in the last, I don't know, 10 years maybe. Mm-hmm. It's not just that's all. We've been doing a lot of pursuing of the issue.
Yes.
And Canada has accepted that we do have a legitimate grievance, not a land claim, a grievance, meaning that we own the land and something has been done to us. So we've been aggrieved, I guess is the term. Mm-hmm. So we filed a grievance.
Aggrieved?
We've been aggrieved.
Really? Yes. That's a new one.
So we filed a grievance against Canada, and Canada has accepted that. But since that time, though, there's all kinds of different things, different ways to upset what we're doing. Like they're saying that, and it goes into different sectors too. It goes into the fact that there's dispute over citizenship, who is, who isn't. Mm-hmm. And, if they have 10,000 people registered, well, all those people have to vote if we're going to have a referendum or something. Mm-hmm. They all have to vote in that. And there's people in there that don't know anything about our circumstance and about the struggle. They just look at perhaps the money that they're going to get out of it.
You're speaking of a referendum. A referendum was held in December 2018 among Mohawks of Akwesasne to decide whether to accept the offer. And 80% of those who participated voted in favor. But how many actually participated?
I don't know.
Yeah. You're wondering, is it people that, well, it's a little bit different over here, I must say.
And I don't know if we can get any statistics or information from them on, who apparently they went house to house, I guess within a designated area to get that support. And I suppose people were allowed to go and to go right into the in various locations where you could say yes or no and vote and what have you. I don't know the details on that. Yeah. But I'd like to find that out. It'd be interesting.
It would be interesting. So the last point on this is, I'm just going to read throughout the settlement agreement with Ottawa. Once they received the money, the Mohawks of Akwesasne effectively renounced their claim to disputed land and confirmed that the 1888 surrender was valid.
They were put in a position where they had to accept total surrender. Mm-hmm. And they had to, despite the fact that their original grievance was that that the 1888 agreement or whatever it was invalid. Mm-hmm. They had to reverse that and they had to say that it's okay, because if they didn't do that, then they'd always have the opening to go back and revisit. Mm-hmm. So there had to be like
so it had to be closure.
Closure, yes.
Total closure.
And today. And it's written into the government's what would you call it, into their policy now, that they can't do that. They can no longer force people to sign an agreement which is total and forever and that's it, that's all. Mm-hmm. They can't do that anymore. So they can come to a settlement on lands, but it's not forever. There's certain things that remain intact for those who are, for those who want to, or in the future needs. Mm-hmm. We're the same thing as Canada. Our future needs, we have to be able to do things for the future. Canada wants to do the same thing too.
For sure.
Yeah, they want our natural resource and all that stuff. We need to exercise our rights on not only the lands that we have here, but outside of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, with that, we'll go to our second break. Okay, and we're back. Today is MCK Friday, and my guest today is Grand Chief Joseph Tokwiro Norton. We've had certainly an interesting conversation up to now on land issues and what's been going on in our community and also our sister community of Aguasasne. Now we're going to talk a little bit about travel. So, Joe, I would like to ask you about the ice show that took place in London that you attended, I think, in February. How did that work out?
The first week of February. It went very good. I guess to explain the background, the ice show is, I guess, considered the biggest gaming show in the world. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what the last count was, but I know last year when we had gone, there was like 50,000 people that went in over a 3-day period. Mm-hmm. And the Kahnawake Gaming Commission has a booth there. Mm-hmm. So we're established amongst all of the competition from around the world.
And do people know about the Kahnawake Gaming Commission?
Oh yeah, there's a big, huge booth there, and we have our logo up and all that kind of stuff. And it's interesting, as people pass, they stop, they start asking questions about who we are and what we do. And some people already know about us. Mm-hmm. So they want to come and they want to ask questions regarding, because in comparison to other jurisdictions, other gaming commissions around the world, we charge a fraction of the price to establish, mm-hmm. operations here and things, and to get a license to establish your online company here. Other jurisdictions are like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, we don't charge that, but we still provide what we consider the best services anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of visitors that come there, and a lot of the problems I guess we encounter is because we put ourselves out there and we promote ourselves as an independent jurisdiction. We're not attached to Canada. We're not attached to Quebec. So we're on our own, and we've been in existence for 23 years now. And we have the commission, so we have a variety of people from Kahnawake that go there. I mean, from the council there was myself and Gina Deere, and then there was the legal advisor to the commission, Murray Marshall, was there, and off the top of my head, I couldn't remember the others, but there's several others, and what their jobs are is to be there and doing booth duty, if you will, mm-hmm. for anybody coming there.
Like promotion
and information, explaining to people who we are, what we do, and how we do it. I'm there if needed to also participate, because we have a lot of meetings too that go on.
Mm-hmm. What is the most asked question? How can you do it? How do you do it? You stand on your own without Canada, without...
That comes out quite frequently.
I'm sure.
And you do get questions from maybe unscrupulous promoters, and operators who think they can come in and do all kinds of things like that. Mm-hmm. So we explain to them that if you're coming in, if you want to get a license from us, you have to go through, due diligence. You check your background, who you are, criminal record, and all that kind of stuff to make sure that you're not, you're not a bad character. Because the thing is, you can't have somebody like that coming in. So we have to be very careful about it. And then besides that, we also were invited to the Canada House, it's called, I believe. Mm-hmm. It's like Canada's embassy, and the Canadian Gaming Association put on an event, mm-hmm. and they had various speakers come in and participate, and we got invited to that. So myself, Murray Marshall, Dean Montour from Mohawk Online, mm-hmm. as well as Gina Deere. We went, and before they started, the first thing they did was the speaker got up and acknowledge myself and Gina from the Mohawk Council of Kahnawake, being present. And they didn't do that to anybody else, so it was, I guess you consider it an honor to be acknowledged and to be recognized that you're there amongst all of these, major players in the gaming industry.
Did you ever consider taking another council member with you just for the experience?
Yeah, that's something that I think we should. As a matter of fact, I'm looking at perhaps even stepping back and allowing somebody else to go because I've been going for X number of years now. I've been useful, in various ways.
Oh, sure.
We split up, and there's all kinds of different workshops that are happening. So you go there and you gain a lot of information from that. So for me, it's not a big deal anymore to say, well, somebody else should go.
I think that would be very interesting for another council member to attend who may be interested in taking on the gaming portfolio in the future. I think that we're going to finish with that. And I'd like to talk about I know you travel a lot. Are you worried about the coronavirus?
I would say yes, depending on where you go. Because as of the last 24 hours, it seems like it's all over the place now. The
only place it isn't is Antarctica.
Yeah.
I just heard that this morning, and I thought that was so
Can't
interesting.
survive up there.
I guess because it's too cold.
So I did cancel my trip to Iran and to China.
Oh, I hope so. And Italy. I'm going on a trip, and I worried about that. I mean, I'm only going to the States, but it's a cruise ship. Now, there's been 2 cruise ships that have been docked because of coronavirus. And, you're on it's not a small space, but you're touching everything that everybody else has touched. But I'm still going. So that's all I can say on that.
No, but I mean, on that note, externally.
You can't be worried about everything, though.
But you still have to kind of try to take precautions, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And there's all kinds of general information out there. I even heard a so-called specialist on TV the other day, and he was saying that you shouldn't be putting a mask on.
Right.
Yeah. And that only those who are sick now should put a mask on. You don't wear a mask, or I forget what the explanation was behind it.
Well, it's because if you have a mask on, the germs don't get out.
Yeah.
But for you to wear a mask and there's nothing wrong with you, the germs can still get in. Or the virus, I should say.
Yeah.
Not the germs.
So what's happening here in Kahnawake is that all the different services are now talking about, preparing in the event of a pandemic, I guess we call it that.
Yes.
And there's certain guidelines that are being sent to all the different operations. Even the MCK itself, in the event that somebody gets sick or whatever, to shut down the office, regardless of what it is, of what kind of service it provides, because that's the only really way to isolate and make sure that it doesn't spread all over the place.
You mean the office? You mean council office?
Yeah, council office.
Okay.
And maybe
for people to work at home.
Yeah, stay at home. If you're sick, before, everybody wants to come in and all that, they're saying, no, if you get sick, stay at home now.
And as far as I know, the virus is very similar to the flu.
Yeah.
Like the
That's
symptoms.
What I'm hearing, yeah.
So how do you distinguish? I guess you have to say, suppose that I'm on the ship and I get, some kind of cough and whatever, and I go and it's only the flu, but where do you go? Is that going to be told to you? Is that I did ask the question the other night when we had our info session, and they told us, don't worry about it, it's okay. So I'm taking that. But I am hesitant, but you can't cancel a trip for that. You're going to lose all your money, first of all.
Well, one thing, I guess, is there any precautions that you can take before you go on
They
a cruise?
They didn't say.
Because I know a couple of years ago I went to South Africa, and we had to take certain pills.
Well, that's South Africa. I'm only going to Hawaii.
got shots,
Yeah.
to make sure that we were inoculated, or if that's the term, for
Was it malaria?
malaria, the other fever. What is it? Anyway, there was two things that we had to get protection before going overseas.
So we're coming close to the end of our show. We have about a minute left before I have to sign off. Any closing remarks?
Yeah, it's just to the community and what we've seen over the last 27 days. We should all be grateful that there was no harm done to anybody. We should all be still thankful that we still have people in this community who, at the drop of a hat, can do things and ready to do things, and that promote as much as possible the unity, the things that have happened in the last little while, for our people to get together and to help support one another, and the roles that everybody played.
Right.
I want that to continue. I want people to really, really, talk it up in their families, with their friends. Because in some families you have a split in a sense that you'll have traditional and non-traditional people. So you can't be arguing over that.
No, you can't.
Yeah, your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, and all that stuff. Like when we used to get together for a family dinner and what have you, my mother would say right away, "No arguments in this house." She made the rules right away.
Good for her. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us. It has been very interesting.